There are moments when fame turns from a dream into a cage, when every word, every look, every silence becomes a weapon in someone else's story. For Sam Heughan, that moment arrived like a storm he never saw coming. One day, he was the beloved hero of Outlander, adored by millions. The next, he was the center of a scandal that made him question everything: his friends, his fans, and even himself. It began quietly, as these things often do. A rumor here, a whisper there, small fires that grew into a blaze of online frenzy. Suddenly, the internet was flooded with accusations, theories, and judgment. People who once praised him now dissected his every move, every smile, every post. His silence became suspicious, his kindness manipulative. The line between truth and fabrication blurred until he could no longer tell which side of it he was standing on. At first, Sam tried to ignore it. He had faced criticism before. Fame always came with noise. But this time, it felt different. The attacks were personal, not about his work, but about who he was. The tabloids painted him as someone he didn't recognize. Anonymous accounts filled his feed with cruelty, questioning his integrity, his relationships, his heart. Every morning became a battle to open his phone. Every night ended in exhaustion, wondering how things had spiraled so far out of control. Behind the scenes, those closest to him saw the toll it took. He withdrew from social gatherings, stopped engaging with fans, and began to isolate himself. The cheerful, witty Sam that had always been the soul of every room became quiet, guarded. His team urged him to speak up, to fight back, but he refused. "The more you defend yourself," he told them softly, "the more people twist your words." But the silence only fueled the noise. And then there was Caitriona. Their friendship, once unshakable, often misunderstood, became another casualty of the scandal. They had weathered years of speculation together, laughed off impossible rumors, and leaned on each other through the demanding world of Outlander. But this time, something shifted. The air between them grew heavy, unspoken. On set, their conversations turned shorter, eyes meeting only briefly before looking away. The comfort that once came naturally now carried tension, not anger, but pain. For Sam, that was the hardest part. He could handle strangers turning against him. But losing the ease of that bond, the one connection that had always grounded him, cut deeper than any headline. Caitriona tried to be kind, professional, patient. She offered small reassurances, quiet smiles, the kind that said, "I know who you are." But Sam couldn't shake the feeling that everything had changed, that the scandal had created a distance neither of them knew how to cross. He started avoiding interviews that mentioned her name. When fans asked about Sam Kate, his responses grew shorter, rehearsed. "We're great friends," he would say, smiling, though the words felt heavy. He didn't want his presence to cause her more trouble, didn't want his shadow to follow her beyond the screen. But deep down, a confession burned that he could never voice. "I can't face her anymore. Not like this." There were reports of him spending days alone, hiking in the Scottish Highlands, where the cold air and silence offered relief. Friends described him as haunted, but determined to stay grounded. He would say, "Nature reminds me that the world is bigger than the noise." Yet even in the vast quiet of the mountains, his mind wouldn't rest. He replayed conversations, wondered if he could have done something differently, spoken sooner, clearer, braver. The world saw only headlines. Sam Heughan under fire, Outlander star breaks silence, Caitriona distances herself. But what they didn't see were the sleepless nights, the phone calls unanswered, the weight of carrying a name that no longer felt like his own. He wasn't angry, just tired. Tired of explaining himself, tired of trying to be strong, tired of watching something pure get distorted beyond recognition. And somewhere in that exhaustion, a quiet realization took root. Maybe this was what fame really was. Not the lights, the applause, the admiration, but the loneliness that followed when the world stopped seeing you as human. Sam once told a friend, "The hardest part isn't being hated. It's feeling invisible to the people who once knew the real you." That truth lingered in every step he took through those dark days. Because even as the scandal faded and the world moved on, one thing remained. The silence between him and Caitriona, heavier than ever. Filled with all the words they could no longer say. He disappeared for a while after that. No statements, no interviews, no posts, just silence. For someone constantly under the spotlight, it felt like vanishing. But Sam Heughan didn't disappear to escape the world, he did it to survive it. The scandal had left him drained, fragile, and uncertain of who he was when the applause stopped. Fame had once been a dream. Now it felt like a mirror reflecting all the things he didn't want to see. He spent those months in the quiet places that still felt real, the Scottish Highlands, where the air cut through the noise, and the only voices were the wind and his thoughts. Friends later said they barely heard from him. He hiked for hours, sometimes in the rain, sometimes under skies so clear it hurt to look. When you lose control of your story, he would later say, the mountains remind you there's a world that doesn't care about gossip. But even surrounded by beauty, the heaviness inside him stayed. He missed the laughter of old days, the long hours on set when Caitriona would tease him for forgetting lines, the inside jokes that only two people who'd spent years pretending to love each other could share. Yet now, every memory came with a sting. He wondered if she still believed him, if she still trusted the man behind the headlines. The thought of facing her again made his chest tighten. How do you look someone in the eye when you feel like you've disappointed them, even if you didn't mean to? He once wrote privately in a journal. When production resumed, Sam returned, leaner, quieter, but with a different kind of strength in his eyes. The set felt familiar yet foreign. Everyone treated him kindly, but cautiously, as if unsure what version of him had come back. Then, one morning, he saw Caitriona walking toward him across the studio lot. For a moment, time folded. She smiled, that gentle, professional smile, and greeted him warmly. He smiled back, but something inside him broke a little. He wanted to say so many things. I'm sorry for the silence. I missed our friendship. I hope you never doubted me. But the words stayed locked behind years of restraint. That evening, in an interview about the new season, Sam was asked if it felt different this time. He paused. The lights were hot, the room too quiet. Then he said softly, "It's been hard. But sometimes, you need to lose yourself to understand what truly matters." The interviewer moved on quickly, but fans caught the tremor in his voice. Some thought he was talking about fame. Others knew he was talking about someone else. Over time, Sam began speaking more openly about mental health and the darker sides of celebrity life. He admitted that there were days when he felt completely lost, when the pressure became too much. "I'm lucky I had people who reminded me who I was," he said, "even when I couldn't see it myself." He never named Caitriona directly, but his tone carried the weight of gratitude. She had reached out, quietly, away from cameras, not as a co-star, not as a public figure, but as an old friend who remembered the man before the noise. Still, the distance remained. It wasn't hostility, just space carved by time and circumstance. The bond they once shared would never return to what it was, and maybe that was okay. Healing didn't mean going back. It meant learning to move forward with tenderness for what used to be. In one of his rare reflective moments, Sam said, "I couldn't face Caitriona for a while, not because of anger, but because I didn't know how to face myself. I thought if I avoided her, I could avoid the person I'd become. But she never judged me. She just waited." Those words, quiet and sincere, told more truth than any headline ever could. Now, when he speaks of Outlander, his voice carries warmth again. The darkness that once clouded his life hasn't vanished, but it no longer defines him. He talks about gratitude, resilience, and forgiveness. The fans who once pitied him now admire him for his honesty. The man who once hid behind smiles now allows himself to be vulnerable. As for Caitriona, they stand side by side again, not as the mythical Jamie and Claire, but as two people who have seen each other at their best and worst. Their connection has changed, tempered by pain, strengthened by time. And when their eyes meet now, there's no regret, only understanding. Some relationships don't need words or labels, they just need truth. Sam often ends his reflections with a quiet message that feels like a lesson carved from his own scars. Don't let the world define your story. Find peace in the parts no one sees. Maybe he still carries guilt, maybe he still remembers the weight of those dark days, but he's no longer hiding from them. The man who once said, "I can't face Caitriona anymore," has finally learned that facing her, and himself, was the only way to heal. And that's the quiet victory behind all the pain. Realizing that even in the darkest chapters, there's a way to step back into the light, if you dare to look up again.